If you are interested in watching Naruto fanfiction stories, please help get the channel to 1,000 subscribers. Welcome back everyone. Today, we're continuing with the next part of this series, called What If Goku Remembered the Saiyans? My name is Ash. Please, for me, drop a like and subscribe to the page. Also leave your comments down below. With that, let's begin. Kakarot, Raditz, and Bardock stood in the open desert, a breeze gently blowing across the sandy landscape as they waited. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows behind them. "Are you sure Vegeta's going to show up today?" Kakarot asked, glancing over at his brother. "That's what his message said," Raditz replied, folding his arms. "Let's just hope he's in a good mood." "If he isn't," Kakarot said with a smirk, "we'll just have to adjust his attitude." Yamcha, Tien, and Piccolo landed beside the trio of Saiyans, dust swirling up as they touched down. Yamcha cracked his knuckles, grinning. "Don't worry, we've got your back." "Did you wish Krillin back yet?" Kakarot asked. "We brought him back this morning," Tien replied. "He said it might take a few hours to get here from King Kai's planet." Far from the group, in a deserted area far from civilization, Vegeta stepped out of his space pod, scanning the horizon. His scouter beeped as it locked onto nearby power levels. Nappa, towering beside him, punched a few buttons on his own scouter. "There are 2 power levels of 5,000 off in that direction," Nappa said, frowning as he turned to Vegeta. The tall, bald brute of a Saiyan wore the black and gold armor of the Saiyan army, while Vegeta stood proud in his royal blue and white armor, his flame-like hair waving in the wind. "That must be Kakarot and Raditz," Vegeta mused, a sly grin forming on his lips. Nappa scowled, glaring at the numbers flashing on his scouter. "This thing must be broken. There's no way that runt Raditz could be that strong." Vegeta chuckled, clearly amused by Nappa's disbelief. "Afraid of being surpassed by a low-class warrior, Nappa?" He laughed again, enjoying his comrade's frustration. "Who else could it be? I doubt anyone else on this pitiful planet could have those kinds of power levels." Nappa, still annoyed, hit his scouter again. "There's more. 1 power level at 4,400, another at 4,200, 1 at 3,600, and 1 at 3,000. Vegeta's grin widened. "It looks like they've been busy. Raditz was barely at 1,200 when he left. I'm curious to see how they've gotten so much stronger." Without further words, the 2 Saiyans launched into the air, speeding toward the power levels. "They're here," Raditz said, his tone tense as he scanned the horizon. Kakarot narrowed his eyes, sensing the approaching energy. "I can feel 2 of them. The stronger one is Vegeta," Raditz said. "The other is Nappa. Let's just hope they aren't looking to start trouble." "If they are," Kakarot said, a determined edge in his voice, "we'll handle them. Out here, we won't be disturbed by anyone. Besides, they're strong. They'd make great allies against Frieza." Several minutes later, Vegeta and Nappa touched down, their imposing forms towering over the Z-Fighters. Vegeta, his eyes scanning the group, was the first to speak. "I'm impressed," he said with a smirk. "I didn't think you'd be able to gather such a force of warriors from this pathetic planet." Yamcha bristled at the insult, stepping forward. "Who are you to call this planet pathetic?" He shot back, fists clenched. Yamcha stepped forward, his anger clear on his face. "Who are you to call this planet pathetic?" He shot back, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. Vegeta turned sharply, his eyes narrowing as he focused on Yamcha. "I am the prince of all Saiyans," Vegeta barked, his voice filled with pride and arrogance. "And you are nothing but a pathetic weakling." The insult was sharp, his gaze dismissive as he turned his attention away from Yamcha, as if he didn't even consider him worth a real response. He faced Kakarot and Raditz, his expression slightly more respectful, though not much. "I figured you'd keep your men in line," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. Kakarot's face remained calm, but there was a slight edge to his voice as he replied, "They're not my men, Vegeta. They're all volunteers. I treat them with respect, and they fight for our cause because they believe in it." Raditz, sensing the tension building, quickly interjected before things escalated further. "Enough of this. Let's get to the reason we called you here." Vegeta's expression softened only slightly. His curiosity piqued. "Yes," he said, his arms folding across his chest. "What's so important that you dragged me all the way to this backwater planet?" Kakarot took a deep breath, knowing the gravity of what he was about to propose. "We want your help in defeating Frieza." Nappa, who had been standing silently next to Vegeta, couldn't contain himself. "We dare not challenge Lord Frieza," he blurted out, his voice filled with disbelief. "Shut up, you fool!" Vegeta snapped, glaring at his brutish companion. "Let them finish." He turned back to Kakarot, his interest piqued. "You wish to challenge the strongest being in the galaxy?" Kakarot's eyes were unwavering. "Yes, Frieza destroyed our people. He needs to be stopped, and we're going to make him pay for what he did to our race." Vegeta's eyes narrowed slightly. Though he too desired power and strength, he had never dared to openly challenge Frieza. And what exactly did Frieza do to our race? Vegeta's voice carried a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Though he hated Frieza's control, he wasn't foolish enough to go against him without reason. Kakarot didn't say a word. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small recording device. He pressed a button, and a holographic message played, displaying Frieza's direct involvement in the destruction of planet Vegeta. The cold, merciless way in which Frieza had wiped out their people was laid bare before Vegeta's eyes. For a moment, Vegeta stood in silence, his face unreadable, but then his fists clenched, and his body trembled with barely contained rage. "I can't believe it," he growled through gritted teeth. "All this time, we've been Frieza's pawns, played for fools." His voice grew louder, angrier. "His blood will soak the ground at my feet for this." But before Vegeta could rant further, a sharp beeping sound interrupted him. His scouter blinked, signaling something was approaching. "What now?" Vegeta muttered, pressing the button on his scouter. He glanced at the readout and frowned. 6 large power levels are heading this way. Kakarot and Raditz exchanged confused glances. "Friends of yours?" Vegeta asked, his tone almost mocking as he looked toward the two brothers. Raditz shook his head. "Not ours," he said firmly. "We were expecting one more ally, but not 6. Nappa, who had been busy checking his own scouter, looked worried. "The highest one is at 24,000, he reported, "and they're coming straight for us." "Frieza must have sent them to follow us," Vegeta said darkly, his voice filled with realization. "He knows." Far above the planet's surface, Zarbon and Didoria exited their pods, stretching their limbs after the long journey. Didoria, his pink skin glistening in the sunlight, grinned maliciously as he checked his scouter. "Vegeta's definitely here," Didoria said, his deep voice carrying a hint of excitement. "There are several power levels around 5,000 near his." Zarbon, ever calm and composed, brushed a lock of green hair away from his face. "This should be easy enough. Vegeta's strong, but he's nothing compared to us." He smiled confidently. "I'm just here to watch, really." Kui, who had come along with them, interrupted their banter. "I want first crack at Vegeta," he demanded, his fish-like features twisting with bitterness. "He and I have unfinished business." Zarbon shrugged, uninterested. "Fine by me. You can take him. I'll just enjoy the show." Didoria sneered, his patience wearing thin. "I don't even know why Frieza sent you here," he muttered, glaring at Kui. "I could handle this on my own." With no further conversation, the group of Frieza's elite soldiers blasted off toward the location of the Saiyans, humans, and Namekian warriors. Minutes later, the 6 invaders touched down in the desert, facing the Z-fighters. The tension was thick in the air as Vegeta stepped forward to address Zarbon, the leader of Frieza's group. "Zarbon," Vegeta said coldly, eyeing him with disdain. "What are you doing here?" Zarbon smiled coolly, brushing off Vegeta's hostility. "I was about to ask you the same question, Vegeta. What brings the great prince of the Saiyans to such a miserable planet like this?" Vegeta's lips curled into a smirk. "Well, one of my fellow Saiyans found his long-lost brother. I figured I'd welcome him personally." Zarbon's eyes narrowed. "You know Frieza has a standing order to be informed of any new Saiyans that are discovered," he said, his tone sharp. Vegeta's voice dripped with sarcasm. "I am their prince. It's only fitting I be informed first." "You're so full of yourself," Kui cut in, his voice full of venom. "Frieza should have killed you years ago." Zarbon, uninterested in Kui's rant, gave out orders. "Kui, you take the 3 weaker Saiyans. Apula and Nappa will handle the 3 humans, and that Namekian. Chomper," he said, glancing at the small reptilian warrior beside him. "You can take the kid." "What about Vegeta?" Kui demanded, eager to take on the Saiyan prince. "You'll follow orders," Zarbon said sternly. "Didoria will handle Vegeta. Now go." Without hesitation, the 6 invaders charged toward their designated targets. Kui flew straight at Raditz, Kakarot, and Nappa, ready to fight all 3 at once. Meanwhile, Apple and Nappa zeroed in on Tien, Yamcha, and Piccolo. eager to crush the weaker fighters. Chomper, though visibly annoyed at being tasked with fighting a child, launched himself at Bardock, not willing to show any mercy. Didoria remained behind, a cruel grin spreading across his face as he approached Vegeta. "Give up now," Didoria said with a mocking laugh, "and maybe I'll go easy on you." Kui was the first to strike, his fist slamming into Nappa's gut with such force that the massive Saiyan doubled over in pain. "You Saiyans are weak," Kui taunted, laughing as Nappa crumpled to the ground. He quickly turned his attention to Kakarot, launching a punch aimed directly at his face. But Kakarot was ready. He effortlessly blocked the attack and countered with a swift punch of his own, catching Kui off guard. Kakarot's fist smashed into Kui's face, sending the alien flying backward. "Raditz," Kakarot said calmly. "Help the others, I'll deal with this one." Chomper lunged at Bardock with a flying kick, aiming for the boy's head. Bardock, quick on his feet, flipped backward, dodging the attack. He landed smoothly and pushed off with his foot, drawing his sword in a single swift motion as he charged back at Chomper. The blade swung through the air with deadly precision, nearly catching Chomper off guard. The reptilian warrior barely dodged the attack, his scouter beeping as he read Bardock's power level. 3,000, Chomper thought, his eyes widening in shock. This kid was stronger than Kakarot had been the last time they fought. He hit his scouter again, double-checking the reading. This brat is dangerous, he realized. But before Chomper could react, Bardock's sword came inches from his head. He dodged just in time, his heart racing from the near miss. Apule and Nappa charged at the remaining warriors. Apule's fist slammed into Yamcha's stomach, causing the human fighter to double over in pain. Tien rushed to his friend's side, launching a flying kick aimed at Apule's head. But before the attack could connect, Nappa intervened, firing an energy blast that sent Tien crashing into a nearby mountain. Nappa then turned to block an incoming punch from Piccolo, retaliating with a powerful fist aimed at the Namekian's face. Vegeta wasted no time, launching himself at Didoria with a speed that caught the larger warrior off guard. His fist connected with Dodoria's face, but the pink-skinned alien merely grinned, grabbing Vegeta's arm mid-punch and twisting it painfully behind his back. "Really, Vegeta?" Didoria mocked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did you honestly think you could defeat me?" Vegeta growled in frustration. "I'll tear you apart, Didoria," he spat through clenched teeth. On the battlefield, Apula had Yamcha by the hair, his grip tight as he laughed cruelly. "You're pathetic," Apula sneered, his voice filled with contempt. "Not even worth sending to oblivion." With a flick of his wrist, Apule unleashed a point-blank energy blast into Yamcha's face. The desert bandit's lifeless body fell to the ground. His life ended in an instant. Tien, barely pulling himself out of the rubble, witnessed the brutal execution of his friend. Rage boiled within him. "You'll pay for that," he growled. Apule turned, grinning. "I'm sure I will," he said mockingly. Piccolo, struggling against Nappa, managed to stretch his arm to twice its normal length, catching Nappa off guard momentarily. But the alien warrior quickly blocked the strike and retaliated with another energy blast, sending Piccolo tumbling backward. Piccolo grunted in pain, his body aching from the impact. "This isn't good," he thought as the smoke cleared. He could feel the immense power radiating from his enemies. Despite all his training, all his efforts, he wasn't strong enough to make a difference. Bardock continued to strike at Chomper with his sword, the sharp blade slicing through the air with precision. The reptilian warrior moved just fast enough to avoid the deadly weapon, each swipe barely missing its mark. Chomper, feeling his confidence grow, saw an opening and swiftly kicked Bardock in the gut, forcing the boy to double over in pain and stagger backward. Wasting no time, Chomper raised both fists and slammed them down onto the back of Bardock's head in a brutal double axe handle, driving the young Saiyan into the ground. Dust and debris flew into the air as Bardock's body hit the dirt hard. "That's enough from you," Chomper muttered, grabbing the boy by his shirt and lifting him up effortlessly before smashing him back into the ground with brutal force. Bardock's groan of pain filled the air as he struggled to recover, his small body trembling from the impact. Chomper sneered, his eyes glowing with malevolence as he gathered energy in his hands. A blast of light shot from his palms, slamming into Bardock's unprotected body. The young Saiyan cried out, his body convulsing from the energy attack. "Now to finish this," Chomper said coldly. He bent down and picked up Bardock's fallen sword, raising it high above his head, ready to deliver the final blow. Before the blade could come down, a powerful hand grabbed Chomper's wrist, stopping him in mid-swing. "That's my nephew," Raditz growled, his eyes burning with fury as he held the reptilian warrior in place. "And he's under my protection." Chomper gritted his teeth, trying to force the sword down. "Raditz?" he hissed, shocked at how easily Raditz had stopped him. "How are you this strong? You were nothing but a weakling." Raditz's expression was cold, his grip on Chomper's wrist tightening. "I'm weak no longer," he said in a low, dangerous voice, "and you won't live long enough to find out why." With that, Raditz flung Chomper into the air with incredible force, the reptilian warrior dropping Bardock's sword as he was sent flying. Raditz smirked, raising his arms above his head. "Double Sunday!" he shouted, firing twin beams of energy that shot into the sky, colliding with Chomper. The reptilian warrior didn't even have time to scream before he was disintegrated in the blast. Meanwhile, Tien was struggling against Apula. Sweat dripped from his brow as he summoned the last of his strength. "Tri-beam! Ha!" he screamed, putting everything he had into his attack. A massive burst of energy shot from his hands, pushing Apula back, but it wasn't enough to do any real damage. Apula smirked as the energy dissipated, standing unscathed. "That's it?" he taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. "You're even weaker than I thought." Panting heavily, Tien fell to his knees, completely drained from using the tri-beam so many times in such quick succession. He could barely lift his head as Apula loomed over him. "You're finished," Apula said, raising his hand as energy crackled at his fingertips. "Time to die." But before Apula could strike, Nappa appeared behind him, grabbing the alien in a crushing body lock. "Not so fast," Nappa growled, holding Apula in place. "Let go of me," Apula shouted, struggling against Nappa's grip. "Do you really think you can beat me?" Nappa grinned, his muscles bulging as his energy began to rise. "I don't need to beat you," Nappa replied, his voice grim and determined. "I just need to take you with me." Apula's eyes widened in horror as he realized what Nappa was planning. "You wouldn't!" he shouted, thrashing desperately. "You'll die too!" Nappa's grin never faltered. "I know," he said calmly, his body glowing with an overwhelming surge of energy. "But I'll make sure you go with me." With a final explosion of power, Nappa's body erupted in a massive blast, consuming both him and Apula. When the dust cleared, there was nothing left of either warrior. Nappa, meanwhile, was mercilessly beating Piccolo, his massive fist slamming into the Namekian's body with brutal precision. "You dare defy Lord Frieza?" Nappa laughed, enjoying his dominance. "You'll die for your foolishness." With one final blast of energy, Nappa disintegrated Piccolo completely, leaving nothing but ashes. Far above, on the lookout, Kami began to fade from existence. Mr. Popo watched in horror, tears streaming down his face. "Kami! No!" he cried out as the ancient guardian vanished before his eyes, his life force tied to Piccolo's. Raditz landed behind Nappa with a grim expression, his heart heavy with the loss of Piccolo. Without a word, he thrust his fist through Nappa's back, the force of the blow punching clean through the alien's chest. Nappa gasped in shock, his eyes wide with disbelief as he felt the life draining from him. You, he stammered weakly, his body trembling before collapsing to the ground, lifeless. Raditz pulled his arm free, his eyes narrowing as he looked down at the fallen warrior. "Your reign of terror is over," he muttered under his breath. He paused for a moment, looking up at the sky. "Your friends are avenged, brother," Raditz said softly. "Now I'll help you finish this." Before Raditz could move, a figure landed in front of him. It was Zarbon, his long green hair flowing in the wind as he smiled coolly. "Not so fast," Zarbon said, his voice smooth and confident. Raditz glared at him and wasted no time, throwing a punch at Zarbon with all his might. But Zarbon moved faster, catching Raditz's fist in mid-air. With a smirk, Zarbon twisted Raditz's arm behind his back, locking him in place. "You're too eager, Sane," Zarbon said casually, tightening his hold. "Let's just watch the fun, shall we? I'll stay out of the fight if you do." Krillin sighed heavily as he reached Earth's check-in station. "I'm coming, guys," he said softly, his voice filled with determination. "Just hold on a little longer." Back on the battlefield, Kakarot was fighting Kui, and despite Kui's arrogance, Kakarot was clearly in control. "Why aren't you dead yet?" Kui snarled in frustration, throwing a wild punch at Kakarot's head. "With a power level of 5,000, you shouldn't even be a challenge." Kakarot smiled confidently, sidestepping the punch with ease. He and Raditz had planned for this. They knew Frieza's men relied too heavily on their scouters. By suppressing their power levels, they had tricked their enemies into thinking they were weaker than they really were. Kui lunged at Kakarot again, but the Saiyan dodged effortlessly, moving almost faster than the eye could see. In one smooth motion, Kakarot caught Kui's arm and yanked him forward, driving his knee into Kui's face. Kui stumbled back, blood dripping from his nose, as he stared at Kakarot in disbelief. How did you? He stammered, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. Before Kui could recover, Kakarot pressed the attack, launching a flurry of punches and kicks with lightning speed. Kui tried to block, but Kakarot's superior speed and strength quickly overwhelmed him. "What's the matter?" Kakarot taunted, a grin spreading across his face. "I thought I wasn't supposed to be much of a problem." Nearby, Vegeta was having a much harder time. Didoria's massive fist crashed into Vegeta's face with the force of a freight train, sending the Saiyan prince flying into the side of a cliff. The impact caused the rocks to crumble, burying Vegeta under a pile of rubble. Didoria stood over the debris, laughing heartily. "So much for the mighty Saiyan rebellion," he mocked, his voice dripping with scorn. "You monkeys were never a threat to Lord Frieza. He kept you around because you were amusing, nothing more." Suddenly, the pile of rocks exploded outward as Vegeta burst free, his face twisted with fury. "You dare insult the Prince of all Saiyans?" Vegeta roared, his voice filled with anger. "I'll kill you." Vegeta charged at Didoria, his fist aimed directly at the Pink Warrior's face, but Didoria was ready. He caught Vegeta's punch easily, his smirk widening. "Oh, Vegeta," Didoria said mockingly. "When will you learn that you're hopelessly outmatched?" At that moment, Krillin landed in the desert and surveyed the battlefield. He could see Kakarot battling a fish-faced alien. His friend seemed to have the upper hand in that fight. No need to interfere with that one, he thought. Off to the side, he saw a blue-green alien with long green hair holding Raditz's arm behind his back in a painful position. But the third battle caught his attention even more. He saw a fat pink alien fighting with a shorter Saiyan with flame-like hair. The pink alien was pummeling the other warrior mercilessly. "I wonder if that one is Vegeta or Nappa," he thought briefly. He decided that would be the best place to intervene. The short-bald warrior shot into the battle. Dodoria's laughter echoed across the barren desert as he squeezed Vegeta's throat in a vice-like grip. "Now you'll die, Saiyan," he sneered, his fingers tightening around the struggling prince's neck. Vegeta's vision blurred, and his body began to weaken from the lack of oxygen. But before Dodoria could finish him off, something hit him hard from behind. The sudden impact sent the hulking alien skidding across the dusty ground, a small cloud of sand and debris rising in his wake. Vegeta fell to his knees, gasping desperately as air rushed back into his lungs. His hand clutched his throat as he coughed, each breath feeling like fire in his chest. Slowly, he forced his head to turn toward his unlikely savior. Standing before him was a small, bald warrior with a fierce expression. Krillin, short but brimming with resolve, stared down at Vegeta. "What are you doing here, midget?" Vegeta spat, his pride still intact despite his near-death experience. "Saving your life, apparently," Krillin replied, not bothering to hide the annoyance in his voice. The conversation was short-lived, as Dodoria roared in rage, rising back to his feet. He was furious, but remarkably unharmed, shaking the dust off like it was nothing. "You little worm," he bellowed, his voice filled with malice. "I'll kill you for that." Krillin quickly adopted a fighting stance, his eyes scanning Dodoria's bulky frame. He could feel the overwhelming strength radiating from the pink brute, much stronger than him. "We're gonna have to take him down together," Krillin said firmly, glancing at Vegeta for support. And that's it for today's episode, guys. If you watched to the end, then that could be an indication that you enjoy the series. So please leave a like on the video. Thank you and take care.